So, the last time we talked, I had wanted to know more about how African drinking and distillation culture transformed outside of Africa.
Yeah, we can absolutely talk about that. But first, I have a bit of a curveball question for you.
Ooh, okay.
To your understanding, what was the Boston Tea Party about?
Okay, child. It was something about taxes on tea and or sugar from the English government directed towards the white colonists of the United States, which were not the United States yet.
That's a pretty good background to even have sugar in there as an option, because the Boston Tea Party is actually about rum.
Oh,
So I think it's easiest to start talking about rum in particular in the West Indies with a little context from the Americas. So, more broadly, I guess, what do you know about rum?
ooh, I don't. I think I mostly think of it as being associated with like desserts, like rum cake, and general like Caribbean history, vaguely, and pirates, and that's about it. Arr, why is
Arg.
the rum gone?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people don't know a lot about rum, and it's actually really complicated. I personally feel like rum should be talked about the way we talk about wine because there's so many different ways to make it and it can taste so different depending on where it's made. So it's a really complicated topic, so I think I should probably explain the basics of rum.
Yes, please.
So we actually get the cultivation of sugarcane, which is the basis of rum, from ancient Arabs and Persians. They often used the labor of those they enslaved, but this was before chattel slavery. This was more of that prisoner of war style. Still not great, but not as bad as it got, you know? They introduced sugar to the Mediterranean in the 11th and 12th centuries. So that was a huge deal. New culinary innovation just dropped. Let's get wild. like just just all of Europe. Like, have you heard about sugar? Um, but then in the early 15th century, the Portuguese start quote unquote exploring Africa. And between some of the islands, like the Canary Islands and even parts of Portugal, like Madeira, which is probably most famously known for sherry, this is where begin to see the first sugar plantations. This would also be one of the first times we get non prisoners of war being enslaved. They were taking Africans from generally North Africa and forcing them to cultivate sugarcane.
Ugh.
Yeah. The Portuguese and the Dutch, the, the rebrand, fantastic. Just, oh, it's so cute and cheap to travel there. And what a nice culture now. And it's, when you actually go back into the history, they're such a big part of how so many things went wrong with how we relate to each other as a international society.
There's definitely a lot of that sort of like we didn't do colonization as much as other countries did, and or we were nicer about it, we weren't as brutal about it. You also get the same thing from groups like Italy, where the common narrative is like
Mhm.
we are not racist and also we were not colonizers. That's only because they failed at it.
They
They
failed.
tried
Yeah.
and were not allowed to do so. Don't let them tell you otherwise.
Yes. Italy was bad at colonizing. That's why.
You don't get moral brownie points because you tried to do a bad and failed. That's not how it works.
Yeah, absolutely not. No gold stars for
Yeah.
trying.
There's like lots of
Um
these like sort of especially because Portuguese sailors and merchants were sort of these like initial kind of uh, forays from Europeans into the African continent and trade in African goods and African people. There's little bits of this history in so many places on the continent. Like my biggest, I think I've mentioned this before to you, but my biggest worry is that I'll finally take one of those like DNA tests one day and find out I'm secretly like 0.02% Portuguese. And it'll just really like fuck with my day because there's
just like, damn it. Whew,
damn. Yeah.
It's like, what are you doing here?
So we get those initial kinds of, are we calling them plantations at this point?
I believe there's a point, because this is, I want to say, 15th century, early 15th century that we start seeing this. So I believe it would still be a plantation, because that's genuinely just, I believe, a French-based word for farm. It's the bad stuff that happened there that made it a bad word. It does technically just mean farm. So I believe that would have been the parlance of the time. That's our background of starting to get into just cultivating sugar. And then with this transatlantic trade, people would discover that the West Indies in particular were well suited to sugar production. And I'm going to call this the West Indies in general, because both the West Indies and the Caribbean are incorrect descriptors of the region. But West Indies is incorrect in a way that makes Christopher Columbus sound like an idiot. So that's the one I choose to go with.
Whenever the greatest opportunity for Columbus slander arises, that is the path we will take always.
Always. Go ahead. Come for us, Italians. This is a very anti-Italian call so far. You have better Italians to uplift. Truly.
Yeah, truly, there are better Italians. The tagline of this show is like,
it doesn't have to
bring us your good ones. We know you have them.
Okay. So clearly, colonialism and imperialism is going to impact how rum production even starts to take off. So I think I should break things down based on these different colonial styles. So let's start with English style, which is the main way to make rum. This is probably what a lot of people think about because it's the dominant way of doing things in Jamaica. This method goes back to maybe the mid 17th century, and again, just British colonies, and it's distilling molasses. It uses this really long fermentation technique that makes it super funky, and that's what makes it so distinctive to drink. They can also become navy strength or overproof, so it's really strong, 100+ proof rums. And because it was a British colony, this was the kind of rum that was often put as a part of rations on ships. So you can make grog, which is basically, I believe, just rum and lime juice and water, maybe water, depending on quality of water, TBD. Yeah, basically to combat scurvy and just keep people in high spirits, literally, because these were also your navy strength and overproof rums. That's what you're going to get from this English style of like distillation.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That's what the English were doing.
There is no more harrowing way to describe any kind of thing I put into my body than to describe it as navy strength. Shiver me fucking timbers. Oh my God. If you're like, here, drink this, it's navy strength.
At the height of the British Navy.
Jeez.
Like Navy meant something different.
Okay, so... Yeah. Oh, so this is going to strip the lining of my throat like it's paint. Great. Sounds good. I'll take a glass.
Is this not for repainting the ship? No, we're drinking this. Okay. Okay. Got it.
Oh, okay, cool.
Got
Okay.
it.
Pickle me from the inside out and call me Clive. Let's do it.
All right, Clive. Let's talk about let's talk about the French.
Oh no!
We got to move. We got a lot of colonizers to get through.
As always.
So many. So the French, it still sounds like rum, but it's spelled RHUM.
Ugh, of course.
Of course. And rum agricole uses the fresh cane juice, what you would normally use to keep boiling and refining to make sugar. They are using that to make alcohol. And they have three categories: Blanc, Amber, and Vieux. Basically, white, amber, and old. Yes.
They gave up on colors on the last one.
For those of you who are, not keeping up with your Duolingo, that's what that means. So Blanc is just kind of rested these days in stainless steel to let it breathe a little bit, and then it's bottled up pretty quickly. Amber is aged up to 2 years in wooden barrels, and then Vieux is aged for 5 to 8 years. So those are the main kind of French rums, and they're made in former French territories in the West Indies, but also places like Reunion and Mauritius. Wherever there was French colonization, there was this unique style. But Martinique is the major player to this day when it comes to this French style of this kind of grassy vegetal rum. It tastes a lot like cachaça. If you've ever had a caipirinha or something like that, if you've ever been to Brazil, it's a little bit like that.
I have never had that, but it sure had a lot of syllables, and I like that.
We'll talk about cachaça a little bit more, but let's talk about the Spanish. They were pretty late to the game, actually. Basically, once they figured out there wasn't any gold on the islands, they just kind of abandoned them and focused on South America. If you read a history of like West Indian colonization, they really just kind of sort of conquer some place and then they leave it unattended, and then the English or French would come in and just take whatever that island was, because the Spanish really did not care. They're like, we heard there was gold over here, we're focusing on the mainland.
Oh, there's none of that good shiny stuff. We're fucking out of here. Enjoy your ecological devastation. We're out.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So much deforestation. But yes, the Spanish style, they eventually get into it because there's a bit of this forgetting about it. And also, Spanish wine and sherry makers did not want rum to take off at all. They did not want it cramping their style. So the Spanish style of rum is a way younger process than the French and English styles. It took a while for them to get on board, but it's the one you probably know. This is your Bacardis, your Havana clubs. Even Captain Morgan is technically made in a Spanish style way.
Ooh, what is that way?
It's really based on how Bacardi set this template. So it's called rum or ron. And they're playing with yeast strains. They're using different kind of methods in their column stills. And the big thing here is charcoal filtration. So you're getting this really drinkable rum with pretty much no funk to it. It's really just kind of smooth and a little intense. And then eventually, these winemakers come around, and the extra aged rums in this category use this Solera method that those winemakers use on their wineries in sherry production, where all these rums of different ages are blended together. So you get more of these aged rum blends with this Spanish style of rum.
So you get a little bit of the funk. Not too
A
much of
little
the
bit.
funk.
Not even funk necessarily. I think just a little bit more complexity from the different barrels and also even just pulling from different islands or regions because a big part of how any rum tastes is actually the soil where the sugarcane is grown. Like I really have been getting into Hawaiian rum because the volcanoes there, it adds this minerality to the soil that makes all of their rum taste very different and almost like a mineral water kind of undertone to it, just very refreshing. That's an example of how location can impact the taste of the final rum.
I am learning so much.
Rum is fascinating and more people need to care about it. I think for the Spanish style, Cuba is the major player these days, but obviously other former Spanish colonies are still fairly big rum hubs.
Yeah, and because you think like sugar cane and you think of table sugar, and obviously with some like fancier high end exceptions that brand themselves on being different, you mostly think of anything sugar related as being pretty much universally the same, right? Taste wise. And so it's funny to think about this other byproduct of the plant that is so region
Mm,
specific and so affected by things like the soil and the climate in those like really localized ways. It's again the kind of situation like we were talking about last episode where you end up sort of drinking the surroundings.
absolutely. Yes. It's such a localized experience that has managed to be ramped up to this international scale. And that's really what helps rum have this global feeling. There's all sorts of varieties. There's even a version called Batavia, Iraq, and that's more kind of Polynesian, like Southeast Asian, anywhere that is tropical, sugar can thrive there, and everyone has their own methods and styles for making rum. So it's not like a vodka where, it's basically Russia and like maybe Poland and Ukraine kind of fighting it out to figure out who's the captain when it comes to the origins of vodka or something like that. It's the way we experience rum is so informed by the age of exploration and the transatlantic slave trade that it kind of loses a little bit of its origin story because it is ultimately a collaboration of things happening.
Yeah. So what happened to Portuguese rum?
I am going to get into that, but first, someone's going to use the phone. So I'll be right back. So you asked about Portuguese rum, and I did leave you hanging there. So we're going to go back to cachaça, which is not a rum, but pretty close. Please, no one in Brazil come for me. I am not trying to say that cachaça is a rum. It actually predates the approximate creation of rum in Barbados by about 100 years. And like the French rums, it uses the full sugarcane juice. So just to flash forward, I'm going to have you read something about the French style of rum making first.
In the rummeries of Guadeloupe and Martinique, where they used the full sugarcane juice to make their rums, I saw several that fermented the sugar juice in open vats. Within hours, the tanks looked like freshly poured pints of Guinness with froth bubbling on the top. Mm, I love a frothy situation.
Yeah, and doesn't that just kind of remind you of Akpateshi a bit of this just it's just out in the open air, kind of naturally alive and like doing its own thing.
Yes, the mention of fermentation and bubbling, yeah, it seems very similar.
So this technique actually goes back to Brazil, where the enslaved people working on the sugarcane mills called that frothy substance cachaça. And this resulting alcohol with the same name is now the official alcohol of Brazil. It is so steeped in their history and culture. I've loved cachaça for a long time, and realizing that that's literally just the name for the dregs, basically. Because for a long time, to be clear, all of this was in this, all of these sugar plantations, it's in the service of creating sugar or molasses, which was a pretty good preservative at the time. So rum and cachaça and all these other things actually come about because enslaved people were taking the literal dregs and creating something out of it. Just typical Black life things, taking what you have and making the best of it, and then having it
Yeah.
co-opted and turned into a multi-billion dollar industry.
Of course, as always. And it's just you have a marginalized people or an underclass turning what should be the dregs of something, or what's considered the dregs of something, an unwanted byproduct, kind of like essentially like a waste material, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and turning it into something cool and unique and amazing. And of course, then yes, once somebody goes, oh, dollar signs, oh, and kind of like metaphorically shoving them out of the way and stepping in.
Yeah. Over time, throughout the transatlantic slave trade, uh, it's actually less, there's less and less money changing hands, and there's so much bartering going on. And rum and
Ah,
sugar is a huge part of this. And, this was hard work. Enslaved people planted the sugar cane, fertilized it, cut the stalks, moved it to the mill, crushing it, extracting the juice, straining it, boiling it, making the sugar. It was really hard work, and it has to be done quickly because there are these natural kind of yeasts in the air and it wants to change. People talk about Henry Ford, but there was a meticulous production line in Barbados in the 1600s to cultivate sugar and eventually rum, where people were working in 4-hour shifts. And if one thing went wrong, the entire day's production could be lost. Like, it was a well oiled machine.
yeah. And it sounds like it's pretty similar to the drinks that we talked about in the last episode, where there's a very narrow window of drinkability and usability, right? Where you quickly go from not ready to,
Yeah. Are we making sugar? Are we making booze? We have to start doing whatever it is right now, or we're screwed. We've wasted the day.
yeah.
Another kind of analog to akpateshie, which, if you remember, another name for it is "kill me quick." And early days, yes, early
I
days
remember.
in Barbados, people called rum the "kill devil," because again, very strong rum in general at this time. Yes, this drink is both murder and the devil. It's the two worst things I could think about in intensity. But what else are we going to drink?
This also just sounds like the 1500s, and frankly probably like most of human history, where the only things that could be any source of fun were also very very likely to kill you, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you want to have a good time, all right, you may or may not survive it, but it'll be a blast.
yeah. Take a walk on the wild side, and you'll either have a great night for your, I don't know, diary and memoirs, or you might not wake up tomorrow. And those are the dice you had to roll in the 1600s.
Yeah, it was go hard or go home for real in
Yeah,
every aspect of life.
just living every day with reckless abandon. But yeah, so you have this super intense alcohol that eventually over time gets a little bit more refined, not even that long. I think by the 1700s, different filtration techniques come into play across the islands, and all of these different kinds of rums get smoother and more palatable. And then that increases their value in trading and really positions the West Indies in a really powerful place, obviously only for, white landowners. But it's such a small amount of land when you really think about the West Indies to have been the cornerstone of international trade for hundreds of years.
Yeah, it's wild to think about just the amount of activity, especially at a time when any given town or places that were just getting big enough to be called a town had so much fewer people than we are
Mm-hmm.
used to. That's like that amount of activity and trade and press of different people and different social classes must have been insane,
Yeah.
right? Like you create like sort of like a mini hyper city in
Mm-hmm.
1500s.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're basically speed running civilization and then just taking the rest of the world and like wrapping it around your finger more or less. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think I think even as things got a little more refined, it was still rum was still seen as a very intense thing to be drinking. I think in the late 1600s, the governor of the Florida colony valued one English servant as worth two Barbadians, or Bajans, if you know, you know, because he thought they were so addicted to rum that they wouldn't be able to do their job. But there's so many reports in the 1700s of enslaved people being regularly plied with rum to keep them subservient. It's just okay. People are mad that enslaved people are addicted to the thing they're being forced to abuse, more or less. So this is kind of where you start to get these really negative stereotypes and connotations associated with Black people and drinking, even though it wasn't coming from them. Unfortunately, this does get a little. I mean, we're already in the dark corner here, but they were also given a lot of rum to encourage them to get it on because it's cheaper to just have your enslaved people make more enslaved people than buy them. And because of this practice, this ends up leading to this really messed up sort of generational cycle of fetal alcohol syndrome that they wouldn't have really had a word for it at the time. But then that's also impacting how people are viewing Black people, Black motherhood, Black children. And it's all baked into this rum production and rum subservience in order to keep the machine going.
Right. And this gets so quickly into like all sorts of patterns that we
Mm-hmm.
see today, right? Where a group gets stereotyped as insert any negative trait here, when the reality is, well, we've poisoned them and set them up to fail and made sure their kids and grandkids would end up the same way, especially at a time where, people know the consequences of alcohol and alcohol poisoning and long term alcohol toxicity, but not only is there limited scientific understanding, there's also not a lot of
Mm-hmm.
social incentive. Black people from the islands and Black people in general are just lazy and dissolute and unserious. Hits a lot different than, hey, here's a group of people who we systematically poison.
Yeah.
Aren't you so glad you're listening to this fun, bubbly
It's so
podcast?
fun. It's we have fun here. We don't have to stay here. Um,
Yeah, but it's important. It's important to acknowledge, right, that like this is a pattern and a strategy, right? It's very easy to talk about these kinds of dynamics in history as if it was like very passive voice. It was just done to. It just happened to.
mhm.
And it's really important to remember that as as incredibly strong and creative as these, groups of Black people were, there also was like a targeted emergent strategy of all these little insidious ways that they were
Yes.
kept under control, and the ways we still see some of these kind of narratives and portrayals at play today in the way that Black people are talked about and the way that all sorts of groups are talked about.
It is probably, when it comes to just language and morality, it is very insidious when people create circumstances for people to fail and then blame that on those oppressed people.
Totally. We're giving you like a quick little inoculation of
Yeah.
inoculation against that bullshit. Right? Like look around in your own life and your own conversations and see where you might
Mm-hmm.
see that happening today. And nip that shit in the fucking bud. Or, I guess little lovers of history might be listening. Nip that shit in the gosh darn bud when you hear it.
We can actually move to a little bit more of an uplifting place. Obviously, have to go to the place in the West Indies where they said, hey, fuck colonialism, actually. So, of course, I'm talking about Haiti.
Yeah. The place where they said, we don't do that here, and stood on it.
Icons.
Yes. Let's talk about Haiti.
When you think about the Haitian Revolution and this pushing back against these colonial powers, there's something else that happens underneath all of this that actually protects a certain kind of rum or sugarcane spirit within Haiti that was kind of frozen in time with how it was made. And that's clarine. It's a sugarcane spirit like rum agricole or cachaça. You're using sugarcane juice, but it is really the product of the enslaved Haitian population creating something in their new environment to make the best of it, basically. And as a result of how they interacted with Europeans, they never took on their methods, their distillation methods, or anything like that, these industrialized techniques. And so there's a little bit more of that nowadays, but generally, you are getting this very local, specific bottle if you're in Haiti for celebrations, funerals. It is this very important elixir that is magically kind of untouched by white hands. And I love that for them. And they deserve their flowers for that.
I absolutely adore that.
There's a lot of sugarcane juice based alcohols out there, but clarine makes you feel good in your heart, not just, on the dance floor after 3 or 4.
Good for the party and
Yes.
good for the soul.
Thank
We love
you
you,
for your
Clarine.
service. Now, I started all of this by asking you about the Boston Tea Party. So we're back. We're back to the beginning. I know you've been waiting to get more information about this. The Boston Tea Party is actually the brainchild of Samuel Adams. Yes, founder and brewer, also distiller and smuggler of tea and molasses. So he found out that the East India Company had been allowed to smuggle tea into Boston without paying a duty tax. There was a weird vibe at the time where there were smugglers, but you still kind of had to either bribe or pay your duty. Like smuggling was almost an under the table acceptable form of business. Like we see the ship, we know something's up. Like you still have to grease some palms to get this done. But the East India Company,
semi-official.
Yes, semi-official smuggling. But the East India Company got around this. So Sam got a bunch of his buddies together, and just for added shittiness, they dressed up like Native Americans. But here's the thing, everyone knew it was them, though. It wasn't even like a disguise. I don't understand the purpose of it. It's truly putting on a disguise and then, I don't know, going to a bar and bragging. That's the energy I get from the Boston Tea Party. Yeah, they just went in there and dumped all of the tea into the harbor because this duty-free tea had devalued all of the local tea that people were smuggling in.
So it's less civil rights protest and more so like corporate sabotage.
Yes, absolutely. It's like you cannot drive down the price of our smuggled goods with your smuggled goods.
We were doing crime here first. Get the hell out.
The American way, truly. We were doing crime here first. Get out of here. I hate to make this comparison, but it is a little bit kind of like this like Claudette Colvin, Rosa Parks situation, because Boston Tea Party is 1773, and that's more of like our Rosa Parks moment. But you have in 1771 the revolutionary kind of Claudette Colvin moment. And for those of you who don't know, she was the first woman to not give up her seat on a bus and did not get as much airtime as Rosa Parks, but kind of set the stage for future revolutionary efforts. So in a similar way, you get the Sugar Act in 1764 that completely forbids the import of rum and molasses. So in 1771, these smugglers get on board their impounded ship and just steal back all of their rum. So they kind of made it known and possible, like, hey, we can just access this stuff and take back our means of making a living in this weird new place that we've decided to take over from people who already lived here. But yeah, so there's actually not so much a protest, but Boston Tea Party is also not a protest, but there's basically this history of action against the crown infringing on people's rights to access sugar and its many byproducts.
Right. Like you think of it less like a sort of civil disobedience. I mean, it's, you know, it's still disobedience, like sort of clash. And it's a little bit more like, again, very apt parallel with the treatment of the indigenous people, but it's more like the Wild West, right? Where it's sort of lawless. It's sort of like might makes right, whatever. If someone takes your stuff, if you can find them and force them to give it back or steal it back for them without them noticing right away, you go for it, right? Like because the broader overall authority and hand of the state is too far away to like consistently and universally keep people in check.
You know, I have so much more to say about America in particular, but I think that's going to have to be a different call.
Understatement of the year. Well, I'm glad to have that little mystery solved, because that was one of those sort of, I have a vague sense of what that was about, but I really don't remember the details, because it feels like the kind of thing that people learn a fake story of in school, and then there's like a new social media breakdown or historical source like re-debunking it every couple years. So it's fascinating to have this sort of like zoomed out bird's eye view of what went on and why.
I am always happy to teach and zoom out. I love the millennial zoom out. And it's so important to our lives. And yeah, next time we talk, we'll take the fight to America and talk a little bit more about these tropes and stereotypes that just built up over time thanks to the transatlantic slave trade and the ills that it brought to the Americas.
It's going to be another fun little romp, y'all.
Nice and chill, really easygoing. I mean, we're going to laugh. We're going to try not to cry. And I'll talk to you then.
Bye.
Bye.
gotta get off the phone.
All Mixed Up is a mixed media podcast hosted by Jay Fergus and Kasimobe Udo Okoye. You can support our podcast on Substack and follow Jay's cocktail shenanigans at Cheers Mix J on all platforms. That's Cheers MXJ. This podcast is edited by Lindsay Zanna, and our theme song is courtesy of Chris Bell. Special thanks go out to Michael Escamuelas, Joel Petrachik, and Austin Russ. Thanks for listening, and remember to clink responsibly. Cheers.